Hey, what's up, guys? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatsoever time you are watching this video. So this is a recording of part 3 of going headless with WordPress using GatsbyJS as a front-end and static site generator. So the reason I'm recording this particular episode is because there were lots and lots of network glitches from the initially live one. So I decided to record. Plus, there were a lot of bugs that I also decided to take some time out to fix ahead of the session. So that's why we are recording this. And here are the things we'll be covering. So we'll be looking into why GIT wasn't working in part 2. We will see why CTL from Nightlify class names template literals wasn't working also. We'll fix issues with the grid, which is what we have here. Let me show that up quickly. So we had an issue with the grid in part 2. We would also be looking into responsiveness for the intro header, the grid in itself, the newsletter. We would be setting things up in WordPress using WP GraphQL and GatsbyJS. Then we'll take a look at we'll do an introduction to GraphQL, its definition, usage. Then we'll look at how we can pull data from WordPress. So let's get into it. So the first thing we want to take a look at is just in time. In the previous episode, in part 2 rather, we had this. So we had this configuration where we set mode equals GIT. So if I come over here and I do Gatsby Develop, let's see. So if you have any issues with caching, what I would advise you do is remove the .cache folder within your project. So which is what I'm going to do. Instead of permitted, retry. Cancel. So try Gatsby clean. All right, so Gatsby clean solved the problem. So come over to and do Gatsby develop again. All right, so things are loading up, or it's getting loaded rather. So while I could have gone ahead to just skip this particular section, but I just feel like it's really important to go over it because JIT just in time has a lot of really awesome features that I have been using in projects. So that's why I decided to go over this again in case you decide to use JIT and everything just goes blank. So this is what you should do. So now it's saying you have enabled the GIT engine, which is currently in preview, blah, 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 blah. But all I really care about is for the website to break right now so we can fix things up. All right, I think we're almost done. So let's check localhost. Yeah, so as expected, the website breaks. So the way to solve this is this. The first thing is stop your development server. It's very important that you stop your development server. Then come over here and add the command purge. Purge, by the way, removes all unused CSS from your project. Then within the source directory, look for all folders, right? And look for any file that ends with .js. Then do comma, then save things up. Then come over here and run Gatsby Develop. And of course, it will take a few seconds. So that's the way to resolve any issues with purging or using JIT when working with Gatsby and Tailwind CSS. So you have enabled the JIT engine, which is currently in preview, blah, blah, blah. So let me rerun the server, refresh things in my browser, and that is fixed. So the next thing is we installed CTL we installed a plugin from Netlify called @netlify/class names template literals, which enables you to be able to write to make your CSS look clean within GatsbyJS. So if I come over to preview, I think, no, a preview blog, pages intro. So we tried using this plugin the last time and it wasn't working. And honestly speaking, I didn't do anything. So I simply ran the server and things were working pretty well. So that's the way to resolve that. So let's check the next thing on the agenda. Fix issues with grid. That has been fixed also. I didn't have to do anything. So I think the reason why we had a lot of errors was because my PC was running slow and all of those things. So that's why some changes were not reflecting live. So the next thing I want to do is work on responsiveness. So, and I have my Figma file open here, and most of the responsive things we'll be doing are pretty straightforward and will not be taking care of tablet version. We'll be taking care of just the PC and the mobile version. So let's start from the very top. Good. So this heading obviously is too big. So working with responsiveness in Tailwind CSS is very similar to Bootstrap, where you use media queries, right? Or even your vanilla CSS, where you use media queries. And the way things work is this: is you have these commands. We have LG, MD, XL, and so on and so forth. If you check the Tailwind CSS documentation, it does a good job in explaining further. So it's just the same way in your vanilla CSS, where you say at media query and say something like minimum width is equals, let's say 568 pixels. So in this case, I can come over here and say MD text 6XL. Invariably, I'm saying that minimum width of MD, and I don't even know what that value is, but if you check the Tailwind CSS documentation, you'll find it there. And MD is literally like the value I use for anything that is like mobile and downwards. No, mobile and upwards rather, because that's the minimum width. So I'm saying that MD text 6XL, then I'm saying that on mobile screens, text should be 3XL. And I've tested this value before now, so that's why I know that 3XL would work. All right. The next thing I want to do is add some padding left and right. So you might have guessed it. So MD padding left and right PX should be 0. Then on PC PX 8. Then on mobile rather PX 8. And I've also tested this value. Awesome. I think I'm cool with this. One thing I might want to switch up is the padding top and bottom. So MD PY32, then we have PY16. Cool. So quickly to the grid, I would come over to index, then I would say MD grid calls 4, then I'll do grid calls 2. All right. Okay, Figma is still loading up. So the next thing I want to do is get the size of these guys. So this guy is 7 pixels. So I can come, so if I hold Control and I click on this component, VS Code opens up that component for me. So what we have is the description, which is this guy. At the moment, the value is text XS. So I will come over here and do MD text XS, then I will do text 7 pixels. And that's one of the interesting things about using GIT with Tailwind CSS. So in the past, you would have to come within your Tailwind config.css to manually set the value of what you want the font size to be. That is, that font size has to be in the configuration. But right now, you can simply come in here. I'm sorry, let me adjust the screen recorder here. So right now, you can simply come in here and just do text 7 pixels, and it's going to work perfectly. Oh, interesting. So my screen recorder is on the way here. All right, so a little bit small, but on mobile screens, when you're not holding it up close, it wouldn't be this small. Then this guy is 14 pixels. So MD, then text, 14 pixels. That should be base. Okay, SN, 14 pixels. Let's see what that looks like. All right. The height is too large. So I'll do MD this guy. Then I will do minimum height of 120 pixels, and let's see what that gives us. And like I've said, I've tested some of these values ahead of time. Okay, I think I'm fine with that. Margin top 4, then this time around margin top 2 for mobile. All right, cool. I think I'm good with, I'm fine with this actually. The other thing I may want to make adjustment to is within this index, and instead of gap 4, I'll just do gap 2. Gap 2. Yeah. One other thing I may want to add to this is some padding to the left. So I will do MDPX0, that is on anything that is not a mobile screen. There should be no padding. Then on mobile screens we should have PX. Let's do 8. 8 would be too much. I'll do 3. Awesome. So one other thing I wanted to quickly cover is when you're using static image. Let me come over here. So there are various components that you can export from Gatsby plugin image, and one of them is static image, which works with like static images, right? Which is more or less like your image component in vanilla HTML. I don't know if there's anything called vanilla HTML, your normal HTML, right? So one thing that I've observed is an additional padding or border or whatsoever is usually added after the image, which is what you are seeing here. And the way I've found to resolve that is in the parent component or in the parent tag, simply add a text size of 0 and that should resolve it. But many times I ignore this because when you are pulling things dynamically, there's another component we use and that doesn't add any padding or any extra space. But then one other thing you should take note of when using adding text 0 at top level here is ensure that every other thing that you have in here actually has their own default font sizes, which is what we have done here. Or else the font sizes will obviously now be 0, right? Which means that the text will not show up. Cool. So the next thing we want to fix is this subscribe newsletter, or we want to make responsive is this subscribe newsletter. So I would come over the newsletter, and the very first thing I want to do is instead of doing PY16, okay, that one even comes later. So the first thing I want to do is I don't want these guys to be side by side. I want them to be after each other. So we've set this to be flex row. So I'll do MD flex row. Then here it should be flex column. So they are now on top of each other, but they are not filling this space. That is, they should be moving from left to right. So what I'm going to do is, so this input, there's a variable here called input style, right? Let me remove these guys. We don't need these guys. There's a variable here called input style. So what I will do is, and that affects the size of these two input boxes or the styling of these into input boxes. And one of the things we've said is that the width should be 5/12. Now, we only want this to apply to tablet screens and PC screens and above. Then on mobile screens, we wouldn't even add anything. So automatically the width would be 100%. So let's see what that gives us. Cool. So the same thing for the button, for the submit button. So initially we have this to be 2/12. So now that command only applies on PC screens. Cool. So there's something else. For the input boxes, we have a margin right of 2. I will be removing that now. So it's only applying on tablet screens and above. Awesome. So, okay. So that's that for that. For the submit button, this should be PY0. Then I'll do PY3. All right. And very quickly, the form. So PX9. So I will take this from being PX9 to PX3. That affects the padding on the left and right here. Oh, really? Okay, that's not the problem really. That's not it. Okay, so I would do that also. Then I would say this also shouldn't be 8/12. Rather, it should fill the screen. Cool. So we're getting there. We're getting to the promised land. And this wouldn't be 3. This should be 4 or 5. Okay. And yes, I also need to, all right, let me see. With this guy, we'll come back to it. So the next thing I want to do is the font size. Let me check the font size of this guy. That's 21 pixels. So, and the current value is 30 pixels. So I'll come over here and do MD and say text. Adult 21 pixels will be in the list of default font sizes. So I'll just work with this. All right. I think this looks good, except for the fact that there is we have more space here. This other guys kind of fills this up, and the way I can solve that is I could simply add another div here that would undo that padding, since we've added our background to this guy. So I'll simply come over here and do class name equals md px0, then here px3, and that should solve it. Okay, cool. And I think we are good to go. So the spacing, of course, is a little bit too much, especially top and bottom. So I'll just reduce that. I'll simply make that 12, py12. Come over here. All right, so I think it looks a little more compact this way. Let's see. I remove Gmail. Cool. And I think that's all there is to it with respect to responsiveness. So the next thing I want to work on is making this newsletter subscription form work. So let me check this out, just to ensure there are no bugs. So apparently there's a bug here. So the subscribe button. So it's saying here that py0 and py3. This guy. So let's see what could possibly be wrong. Let me refresh this guy. All right. Padding top 0, padding this guy 0, MD this guy. So of course, one of the good things to always do is inspect. So we have here py3. So let me remove this guy and let's see what happens. Okay, so we have exactly the same thing, right? And okay, I guess I know what's happening now. So because we added a margin bottom of 3 here, that's why we have this guy expanding here. So because it's flex, it always tries to fill things up. So let me show you what I mean. So there's a padding bottom of 3 after each of these input boxes. So here's what I'm going to do. I'll simply make this. So I'll say MD MB3. Save things up, and that fixes it. So let's make our newsletter subscription form work. So of course, the very first thing you want to do is to be able to collect the data from the first name and the email, right? So I'll simply come over here and say, and I'll be using the use state hook, which I've imported here. So I'll say const first name set first name equals use states, right? Use states, then it's nothing. Duplicate this and say email, set email, and that's also nothing. But then, so for this guy, on change equals, so we'll create a function which accepts e, and this e function will say set first name to e dot target dot value. And the way we can confirm if this is working is we could simply do set and do first name. So once I begin to input something, you should add the person's first name in here. So we can then do Aremo. So that works fine. Cool. The next thing is the email address. So I can copy this code, come over here and say set email to target the value. Then let me change this to email also. Say, then let's do Aremo. So it works. Cool. So the next thing we want to do is we want to make this input controlled. And the reason we make it controlled is such that we can reset it by the time we are done, which is something I will talk about. So, and to make it controlled, simply say that the value equals first name. That is, you are sending back the value to the input value. So first name, then here I would say value equals email. Awesome. So the next thing we want to do is submit this form. So I'll come here and say on submit equals join newsletter, which is a function which we will now be creating. So I'll come over here and say const join newsletter equals this e. Then we'll come here and say e dot prevent default, and this prevents the form from submitting. So I'll come over here and simply do alert. Then I'll use the backticks. I will say first name and email. All right. So, and for this form, the only validation we'll be doing, we'll let HTML and do all our validation. We won't be doing any custom validation. So your first name is Aremo, then Aremo at gmail.com. Then let's do subscribe. So we have this guy now. So one thing I also want to quickly do is to add a loading state, right? Just to show that the form is loading. And I'll simply duplicate this guy and say loading, set loading, use state is false, then use state is false. So how do we know if this guy is loading? So I'll come over here and say value, and I will say, I'll use a ternary operator. If loading, just say the text here should be loading, that is in the submit button, or else it should be this. One other thing we also want to do is disabled equals loading. So this ensures that the user does not click the button twice and fire multiple requests. So let's save this up and let's do Aremo at, let's just do a gmail.com, then subscribe. So you can see Aremo at gmail.com. All right. Oh, I didn't make any changes here. So the next thing is within the join newsletter, I'll simply say set loading to true. So since we've not taken any action, once you try to join the newsletter, it begins to load your request. So save it up, then subscribe. Then you have the loading text. So in order to be able to send the email somewhere, we'll be using Mailchimp. And the name of the plugin we'll be using is called Gatsby plugin Mailchimp. So I'll do npm install Gatsby plugin Mailchimp. So give it a few seconds to load, and let me begin to set up the configuration here so that we don't waste so much time. So I'll come within Gatsby config, and within the plugins array, I will add a new object, and I'll call it, and I will say resolve Gatsby plugin Mailchimp. Then we need to pass a few options. The first one is the endpoint, which we'll get from Mailchimp very quickly. Then the next one is timeout. So that's the number of times or the duration in which a request can fire for or take to try and be active, right? So I'll make this 3,500. In fact, that's what's in the official documentation. You can check out the Gatsby plugin repository. So to get this endpoint, come to your Mailchimp dashboard, just like I am here. Click on audience, then click on sign up forms. So I'll click on embedded forms, HTML, scroll down and simply copy all of this code and just paste it somewhere where you can easily edit. So I have this plugin in my browser that enables me to do this. So paste it. Then you have to look for a form tag. So, so I'm looking for it now. So form action equals so. So everything starting from this quotation to this quotation, that's your endpoint. So I'll copy, I'll highlight this now, then cut it, then and come over here and paste it in. Please do not use this endpoint. If you use this endpoint, you'll be sending your users data to us, which will not be nice for your business. So I've saved things up now. Gatsby should attempt to restart and all of those things. So that's not working. And so here's what I'm going to do. Restart the server. So that operation actually killed our server. So I'll simply restart the server, hoping that we don't run into any errors. Okay, so things are getting loaded up. So just a few seconds and we should be back up. Hopefully this is like the second to the last time we would be stopping this server in this session. GIT mode is currently in preview. All right, so we should be back up. So come over, so let me close this tab. So let me come over to newsletter. So the next thing I want to do is actually send the form to Mailchimp, right? So I will import add to Mailchimp from Gatsby plugin Mailchimp. And so, sorry, that's my alarm going off. Yeah, so within the join newsletter, so I'll remove this alert for now. I'll simply do add to Mailchimp. And the first parameter it's going to accept is your email. So of course, whatsoever variable you've named your email or you're using collecting your email, that's what you pass in here. Then the next thing is an object of other values. So in this case, I will do fname. Fname is first name. I want to do a quick check here. Sometimes people tend to enter their full name. And so what I would do is I'll simply come over here and say true const true first name equals first name dot split. So I'll split it by space, right? Then I'll come here and say, so I will turn this into an array. So I'm turning the first name into an array in case somebody enters like their full name, say Aremu Smog, right? Then I'll come here and say true first. So it should be first, true first. Let me just make the correction here. True first name into bracket 0. So take the first element or take the first item of the array, and that's what should pass to the f name. And kindly note that this f name is the tag that, or the name of the column for first name within Mailchimp. So take note of that. So the next thing I will do is dot then, and I will say results equals. So the first thing I want to do is response. Let's do resp. So the first thing I want to do is console.log response, so that we can see the value that it's returning. So I would, okay, so okay, done. So I'll do, so let me show you that thing I was saying. So I would do so response, so I would do alert true first name equals into bracket 0. So I will alert it, then I will console.log that, save it up, and so I will do Aremu Smog, then I will do Aremu, which is an email that I know already exists. Then I will do subscribe. So you can see now that despite the fact that I passed in Aremu Smog, what I'm getting back is only Aremu. Do OK. Then let's check our console. No errors, user messages. So this is what is getting returned. Let me see if I can zoom in here. So this is what is getting returned. We are getting a result, we are getting a message, and yep. So, and we have this. So here's what I'm going to do. So what I want to do is just to do a check to ensure that there is no error, or if there's any error, we send it back to the user, right? So we'll say, so I don't need this alert again. So I'll say if response dot results not equals to error, simply say alert alert. I will use the backtick, say welcome home. I will then do true first name into bracket 0 once again, and add an emoji of org. Say else alert something went wrong, or yeah, something went wrong. Then the sad emoji, sad, something went wrong, kindly, something went wrong, kindly try again. So yeah, so and if this was successful, okay, yeah, so let's take it one step at a time. So I remove smog, cool. So it still says loading here. So we'll come back and fix that actually. So I remove. So let me click on this guy. Okay, it has been disabled also. So one thing I want to do is, no matter what happens, once all of this is done, set loading back to false, because the user should be able to take another action after that. Good. So let me refresh this page. Is our server still running? It is. Amazing. All right. So I'll come here and just do our remove. Then I'll use a failed email address again at gmail.com. Then subscribe. Something went wrong. Kindly try again. Okay. So that's that for that, and that's that for that. So the other thing we want to do now is ensure that it goes through. So I'll do word up at rmosmog.com. Subscribe. It's still saying something went wrong. Can you try again? So I'm guessing the reason it's saying something went wrong, can you try again, is because this this is not a full name, right? So because this guy does not, when you are splitting this guy, it has no space and all of that. But I don't think we have so much time for that luxury. So I'll simply come over here and remove this function, as we can. We need to do some checks and all of that, which I don't think I am mentally stable for right now. In fact, this was an afterthought feature. So I'll simply just come back to saying first name, first name, then first name. But that's something you could play around with though. And that's something I would ensure I did if I was working, if this was a live project. So I remove subscribe. Something went wrong. Can you try again? So let me be sure. Let me check the console actually. 13 user messages. So we have nothing in the console really. So let me refresh this page. So we'll do rmove, then I will do a at rmosmog.com, then subscribe. So it says welcome home, rmove. Okay. So, but there's something I'm observing, which is this text is not changing. Loading, subscribe. So add to Mailchimp. So I think, okay, so it should be within here. So let's try, let's give this guy another shot. So subscribe, loading, cool. Something went wrong, then it sets it back to subscribe. So one other thing I wanted to ensure, or I want to ensure, is when the users fill details are successfully sent to Mailchimp, we want to remove all of these guys. So what I'm going to do is, so if there is no error and you're able to welcome the user, simply come here and say set email to nothing, set first name to nothing. So how do we test that? Let's try word up once again. Subscribe, loading. Something went wrong. Can you try data? Let me say I subscribe. So welcome on Mariam, and this data gets sent away. Cool. So we have the newsletter subscription feature sorted out now. So the next thing we want to do is talk about GraphQL and WP Gatsby. So I already have, okay, I don't have it set up. So let me just come over here and do WP, then WP events / WP admin. So it's just your regular WordPress that we are going to turn headless in a minute. And the way GraphQL works is, so GraphQL is, so if you work with APIs before, right, the most popular approach to API is known as the REST API, right, which is you just making a request to various endpoints, right? So for example, if you want to get data for, let's say, all posts, you have to do something like, let's say, webboss.com.ng/API/all post and all of that. The beautiful thing about GraphQL is you make your request to just one endpoint and you have access to all your data. You can then decide which data you want to use within your application or not. So that's the beautiful thing about GraphQL. And really, it looks like a lot when you're looking at GraphQL from outside or from afar. But in my experience working with GraphQL, especially with GatsbyJS, like it's simple. And the interesting thing is you even have an IDE where you can manipulate the data and just put things on and all of that. So essentially by making your WordPress headless with GatsbyJS and GraphQL, essentially you are making your WordPress posts, you are turning them into APIs that can be consumed. So you remember in the introduction of this series, I mentioned that in the past or at the moment, the way WordPress, majority of WordPress works is that your front end and your back end is being handled for you by WordPress, but then the flexibility with respect to what the design will look like is taken away from you. So in this case, you are turning your WordPress into a backend of you being able to retrieve blog posts. So, and the two plugins you'll be working with mostly, and the reason I went ahead to actually install things ahead of time is because of the internet connection, right? So if you come over to plugins, add new. So we're working majorly with two plugins. The first one is WP GraphQL, and the second one is WP Gatsby. So if you come over to plugins, add. So in fact, I'll just search for Gatsby, and the two plugins should show up. So we have WP Gatsby, WP GraphQL, and WP Gatsby cannot work without WP GraphQL. So you can come over and check the settings of both. So if I come over to settings, yeah, I can click on GatsbyJS, settings, GatsbyJS. So build hooks. Oh no. So by the time you go live, this is where you set your build hooks. And the way build hooks works is when you make any changes within your Gatsby, it triggers that build on your server. So this is basically the settings for WP Gatsby, which is GatsbyJS within GraphQL and within WordPress. So for GraphQL, if you come over to settings also, yeah, you see your endpoint and you see a variety of other things that you can do within that you can do with GraphQL within your WordPress. So you have the endpoint to be GraphQL by default. You can make this whatsoever you want, but like what everybody uses is GraphQL. So you can go ahead and do that. Then you can check out all of these settings, which I never really touch. And that's pretty much it. So the next thing is how do you query for your data? So if you come to GraphQL IDE or GraphQL IDE, it gives you access to all the data that you can get. And so it basically gives you a playground where you can explore this data and how you'll be making use of it within WordPress. So, okay, so let's see what it looks like. So remember that this is on your WordPress installation on your WordPress server. So what you could do is just maybe on your server, or you could create a subdomain like, let's say wordpress.yourdomain.com, then install WordPress there and set things up there. So if you come over here, you see we have all of this guy. Then you can come over to, let's say, post, for example. So if you click on post, there should be something like all posts. Okay, it doesn't work like that here. So, okay, yeah, posts, the plural, not the singular. Posts. So if you come over to posts, edges, then node. So for example, if you want to get the title of all your posts, simply come down here and click on title, check this box, then come over here and click on display button. Then you can see you have the title of all of these guys. So the interesting, so and really that's the way GraphQL works. You just copy this guy, then paste it within Gatsby.js or within your React components, and you can create a for loop, and which are things that we'll look at. So one thing also is you also have a copy of this playground on your local server. So let me take this back to 100%. So if you come over to localhost 8000 / and you do underscore GraphQL, it gives you something similar to that playground. 3 underscores, then GraphQL. 3 underscores, then GraphQL. You can see we have something very similar. The only thing is just it is less chaotic. than compared to what we have here. So what we have now, or what we want to do right now, is import all of this data into our GraphQL here. And the way to do that is to install another plugin known as Gatsby plugin. Gatsby. So we'll do npm install. I said npm install Gatsby source WordPress. So we are sourcing for WordPress data, right? So that's what we want to do. That will also take a few minutes or a few seconds to get installed. Then we can then take a good look at things. So so when we pull in the data, we would display them on the home page. Then that would be end of this session. So next week we'll work on the single post session, right? Then we should be wrapping up the session very soon, hopefully by next week. So if you've been joining all the sessions in this series and you think there are ways that this session can be better, please do feel free to drop your comments in the comment section. We'll be taking them into consideration. So it's saying that this guy. So let's give it another shot. So however, I should mention that I actually have the plugin installed already, so I could as well just go ahead and use it, so that we would save time. So so very similar to this, create a new object within your plugins array. Then I'll do resolve Gatsby source WordPress, then options. Then this time around it will be URL, and I will do https webboss.com.ng/events/GraphQL. Save things up. Let's see what happens. So it needs to be restarted. Hopefully it does, but from experience, it rarely ever do. So I'll just kill the server, Control C, then I'll do Gatsby Develop. Okay, so what do we have here? It says the following: there was a problem. I also need to install its package. All right, so let me check. Let me check our package.json, Gatsby source WordPress. So let's try and install it once again. So honestly speaking, I'm really surprised that I'm having a lot of issues with all these plugins and the rest. I've never really I've never really had some of these issues while working on like a live project, because if I'm having all of these roadblocks, I probably wouldn't have used Gatsby this much. Like I've worked with like three large projects with GatsbyJS now, and I've not run into issues like this, except for one though. The project is actually quite larger than every other project. And in fact, like the number of posts on the remote server or the WordPress server is about 1,345 or so. So this has been successfully installed now. Now let's go over to, so let's do Gatsby Develop, and that should work just fine. So, and because you are pulling data from WordPress, it should take a while for your server to load now. So in fact, you're going to see a message that comes from the plugin that says maybe you should take a stretch, or this may be a good time to take a stretch, or take a walk or something. So yeah, so we're deleting your site sketch to ensure there's no stale data. Thank you. Gatsby source, ensuring. So you see, maybe now is a good time to get up and stretch. But we're not getting up, we're getting this done and over with. Okay, so it's fetching posts, fetching categories, fetching page. So we have 12 posts being fetched. or that has been fetched rather. So, okay. So I also forgot to mention that if you actually watched the the original version of the initial version of this particular live stream, where we try to pull data from the web boss blog itself. So the issue we're having was that we had the security plugin, which I myself, I still could not find or lay my hands around, and that's why it's not working. So in case you encounter such an issue, what I would advise is you might want to migrate your WordPress blog post somewhere else where you have a fresh installation of WordPress. That could resolve it, because that's literally what I did. So I exported the post that we have within WordPress and just brought it into this particular installation. So what so Gatsby Develop is running now. And honestly, the only thing I did was to enable debug mode in GraphQL. Yeah. So I come over here and say, where is it again? Yeah, enable GraphQL debug mode. So that was the only change I made, or the only change I made, and it worked. So you enabled GIT already means that it's going to work. Good. So if I come over to localhost 8000, close GitHub, then let me refresh my GraphQL interface also on localhost. Remember that the URL is localhost /___ GraphQL. That's 3 underscores. Then it's getting loaded up. Awesome. You can see we now have all of these guys now. Interesting. So, and just like we did with within WordPress the other time, we have access to all of this data. So what I want to do is I want to get the featured image, the category, the date the post was posted, and the title of the post. So if I come over here, I'll come to all WP posts. So instead of posts like we did in WordPress, what we have is all WP posts on your local server. So all WP posts, then so let me turn off this featured image for now. Edges, so remember all WP post, edges, node, then the title. The next I want to do is get is the date. So it may ask for format. You can deal with this later. The next thing is the category. What you will see is categories. Yeah, because there can be various categories rather. Then we have the notes. Then what I want is the name. So let's check this out first. So you can see we have a day in the life of a web boss, the dates, then the category is a day in the life of a web boss, and all of that. So very quickly, let's format the date. So for the date, I'll simply do, what format do we have here? So, and this is like doing JavaScript. So we have month, day, year. So I'll simply come over here and say format string and say month, day, year, 4 Ys. Then let's see what that gives us. So 05, so this should be 4Ms also. Okay, yeah, cool. So so the next thing I want to get is the image. And getting the image is a bit tricky. The featured image rather, it's a bit tricky. So I'll come over here and do featured image. Then I will do node. Then I'll come over here and do child image sharp local file, then child image sharp. And honestly speaking, it's actually very difficult to explain. So I'll click on Gatsby image data, then I'll click on formats. I'll make it WebP and placeholder is blood. Placeholder is blood. And really, this is all we need for now. So I can copy this query now and come over to pages index. Then for now, I'll remove all of these guys since we now have somewhere we can get things from. So I'll come over here and do posts query, and I'll use this method called use static query, and it is being imported from Gatsby. Then I will use GraphQL, then paste it in. Cool. So I will simply make this home post query. That's the name of the query. Then I'll come over here. I'll create a new variable and call it const all posts or show post. Show post equals post query dot this guy, or remember it's an object, or WP posts dot edges. This is an array. Then I'll do for each. I'll do post, then I'll add an index. Then I would say blog post preview, this component. Then I can now say title equals post dot. Remember that this is a node in the edges. Post dot node dot title. Then the category returns an array. So I'll simply come over here and say, let's do date first. Date equals post dot node dot date. Category equals post dot node dot categories into bracket 0. So it's nodes. So I'm getting the first category 0 dot name dot name. Then we'll come back to deal with the images later. Save this up, and I'll come in here and replace it with show posts. Okay, so this should be a return statement. Oh, it shouldn't be for each, it should be dot map rather. Then this guy should be dot map. Then this guy. Okay, let me see. Then let me add a key. All right, cool. So let me add key equals index. Now let's save this up and let's see what we have within this guy. So it says show post is not defined. So it should be show posts. Cannot read property of name post.nodes. So for now, I'll simply make this guy stories. Right. So let's see what that gives us, just to ensure that we are getting something. So what's name? What else? Which one? Where is the returning name? Okay, this is fine. So it says cannot read property name of undefined, and really there is no where we have name here. So let me simply start this guy all over again. Let's see what that gives us. Cool. You can see that the titles are different, the dates are also different, and that's just like the beginning. So the next thing I want to do is to pass the image. So I will come over here and do image equals post dot node dot featured image dot node dot local file dot child image sharp. It looks a bit confusing, but really just type things out the way they are, and I think it's pretty straightforward. And instead of static image, what we'll now use is Gatsby image. So that's Gatsby image, which is also being exported from Gatsby plugin image. So, but this time around, instead of source, we have image. Then I will use another helper known as get image, and I will import this image here. Then I can add an alt, which is the title, and that's pretty much all we'll be needing for now. So let's save this up. So I'll remove this guy now, save this guy up, remove this guy from here, and let's see what that gives us. Cool. So you can see we now have the images, and it adds this lazy loading of blood and all of that to it. And we have just 8 posts being pulled here. That's because we set a limit within Gatsby config. So quickly, let's see if we can get the categories also, because the categories also need to show up. So I would do posts.node, right, dot categories into bracket 0 dot node, I think, yeah, no, dot name categories. So let me come over here and do so categories. So I'm guessing it's probably an error in spelling. That's why it didn't work the other time. Paste this guy. So the same thing again. So categories. So let me see what the result is giving us here. So it's saying notes. Yeah. Notes, categories. Okay, let me add dot notes. Dot notes. Okay, 0 dot name. Let's see if that solves the problem. All right, so that solves the problem. So posted in a day in the life of a web boss on May 01, 2021. So apparently this is looking bad because the text is looking so long, but I think we just roll with this for now. So this is starting to look good, finally. So by next week, we'll actually look into how we can create the single blog post, then show up some rated posts, and that then look for a way to deploy this guy, and that will be the end of this series. Thanks a lot for joining this session. Please do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and please feel free to drop your comments in the comment section. Thank you.